This week's topic is multimodal perception. So humans rely on multimodal input just because we want to deal with the world. That means we want to encounter risks and want to see which kind of objects or locations or events are actually happening. And as these objects, events, usually produce a lot of signals, rely on any kind of sensory input that we might encounter. So this is an active process, and we actively search for patterns in this data in order to find out which kind of object or location or event is happening right now. Have a look at this graphic. There's a lot of noise in there, but you might find the actual pattern that we have hidden here. It's a dog. Have a look here, but maybe you will need some more help. So if you see these red borders, there's a head of the dog and the tail. So as you can see, we actively search for patterns, and if we know what we are looking for, it gets more easy for us. This is the topic of the day, and I have 4 subtopics. I will start with explaining the processing basics of multimodal signals, then explain a little bit on the 2 dual tasks and how we proceed and process multimodal input for dual tasks. I will then explain how effects of discongruent information we deal with, and I will complete with the relevance for HCI. So cognitive theories claim that we have several different processing modules and resources that we can use. And at least for the audio speech-related information and the spatial visual information, we know that these can actually be processed quite reliable and efficient in parallel. So as I already told in the first week, this kind of processing of multimodal input from the same source is not more demanding than unimodal processing. Actually, if we encounter more information or from information from several channels, this input can be more reliable and more salient for us. So this means it helps us to focus our attention to it and process this kind of information more easily, for example, to recognize certain objects. I will talk about the superadditivity aspect in a second. The main result is that there is reduced variance due to this increased neural response that we have, and this helps us to actually identify objects more easily. As a conclusion, human perception is really designed for dealing with multimodal input signals. What you can see here is the human's neural activity as a response to an animal stimulus. Here we have a rooster's cry shouting the cock-a-doodle-doo. Once in visual-only stimulation on a display. Once only the auditory information, and then in the last row it's the audio-visual, the multimodal stimulation. And you can see the weak input, if it's not that strong in intensity, resulting just in reaching a threshold without any neural spikes sent from these kind of cells. And with a strong impulse of strong stimulation, we have the spikes here, the neural spikes which are triggered. The same we have for the auditory modality. So also here there's a weak input with just a few spikes and a strong input with a lot of spikes. And if we now compare the multimodal response of the humans compared to the addition to the combined input of these two, we see that there are actually cases in which the multimodal input stimulates the human stronger than the sum of the single individual inputs. This is called superadditivity. So as we are perceiving objects, locations and events in a multimodal way, there are a lot of relevancy here for multimodal HCI. And according to Jacko et al., we have multiple benefits if we produce multimodal output and be aware according to the first lecture of the first week that we had, this is actually multimedia output. So there are decreased reaction times of the users. There's increased salience and prominence. This means that the user can more easily identify objects, and also the attention of the users can be grabbed more easily if we provide multimedia output. There's decreased workload, more robustness, as I said, and maybe even more naturalness or authenticity if we want to really synthesize certain experiences. There's also shorter completion time of certain tasks observed. So, as a conclusion, there might be improved usability and user experience by multimedia system output, and this actually means multimedia perception of users. It's also especially relevant for certain target groups, such as older adults or people with certain deficits. And it is also used to design new interface paradigms. For example, have a look at the website of our colleagues here. They developed a multimodal system in a certain virtual environment. This means they have a 3D audio synthesis system and also a 3D virtual environment with the visual information. And what they basically do is that they not only use a certain 3D display in order to synthesize or create virtual objects, but they try to find out whether it's better, improves the user experience, if we also have located three-dimensional sound sources at the same spot and same location in space as the visual information of a certain object. And you can create these kind of virtual objects in an auditory and visual way in order to interact with the system. You can also enhance a real object that you use as a tangible interface with the system by virtual sound sources. And they built up this system and they found out that indeed the user experience is better than without the auditory information. So each modality is special, at least to us humans. This means, for example, that the visual information are especially good for spatial information and also for details. So this means we want to use them for complex information and spatial information. And the auditory system in us humans is especially detailed and good for temporal information. And of course, we can hear from everywhere, at least if the sound sources reaches our ears. So this is especially good for using it for warnings, grabbing attention, and so on. In order to study human perception, especially the way the different signals are integrated and processed in the human, we typically also rely on fake data, which means that we try to synthesize information on different channels, say the auditory channel and the visual channel, and they are not congruent, they do not match that good. But I will talk about this in the next session.